Hello my fellow aquascapers. So we all know how important CO2 can be in a planted tank, and to that end we also know how expensive it can be. But today I thought I would try and save a buck, so I picked up this Co2Art regulator, cheap on the second-hand market. Unfortunately it was cheap for a reason. The seller tells me it's leaking and they don't know where it's leaking from or how to fix it. So I thought since it was so cheap I might as well just give it a stab and see if I can save that buck. Now it's pretty marred up on the locking nut here, and I can also see that the main seal is actually missing, so hopefully that's the issue. If not, we might have to take drastic measures into use. So I've already picked up a new main seal, so let's try and hook this one up and see what it does or doesn't do. So for this little experiment we are of course going to need some CO2. Now I'm just going to borrow this the cylinder here from the 6 kilogram cylinder, in fact from this aquascape. I do have a spare, but that's currently empty, so this is what we have to work with. Alright, so I think I haven't even connected it yet, but I think I might have already found the issue. I don't know how well you can see, but this gasket here for the bubble counter, which I just went to fill up, is pretty twisted. So I would venture to guess that that's the issue. So I'm just going to pull this out and see how it looks, and if it's reusable I will put it back in. If not, I will have to see what I can do, because I don't have another one of these ones, though I do probably have an O-ring somewhere. So I got out this little rubber gasket, and as you can see it looks perfectly fine. Unfortunately though, it does look like it's a little bit too big for the actual top of the bubble counter. Now it might have expanded over time. This regulator is supposed to be about a year old, so if not, I'll see what I can do. But I think we're going to just try and put it back in straight and see what happens first. Alright, so the O-ring is back in. As you can see, it's a little bit wavy. That's because it is slightly too big for this top. I would guess that it is the original O-ring, but it might have expanded over time. So, but it's no longer twisted, so it shouldn't matter too much that it's wavy. It will compress when I screw on this lid. But let's see what happens. Okay, so now that we've found and hopefully solved that issue with the bubble counter, it's time to get on the CO2 regulator. Now first we need to remove this old regulator. It's an old JBL regulator. It's actually been quite good. It's never failed. It's like 7 years old, so time for something new. Now since this is that old, it's already been marred up a bit, so a bit scratched up and dinged up. So I'm not too worried about using the right tool, and of course I don't have one right now as it happens. But the first thing we need to do is close the CO2 cylinder. So this is an 05 thing, so we're just going to pull this pin, which can both keep it open and closed. So now it's actually closed. And then ideally you would want to let out the pressure that's inside the regulator, but this regulator doesn't have that option, so I could just let it out into the tank, but I don't really want to do that either. So I'm just going to take the regulator off. Like I said, this is an old regulator, so it's not in the best of condition. It does work fine. It's been really good, actually. Never failed once, so I don't have anything bad to say about it. I just thought since I had the option to get a cheap CO2 regulator, why not go for it? And I do have plans to use this regulator in another tank down the road sometime. Now this is pressurized, so it will hiss a bit when it releases the gas, which should happen any second right now. There we go. Just release that excess pressure that's built up inside the regulator, and there we go. So there goes that sealing ring, that's fine. Now let's try to put on this CO2 regulator. The first thing we need to do is of course replace the missing main seal. This is a nylon washer, so it doesn't need to be crushed, just tightened. Let's put the regulator on. You'll want to, before you crank down on it, you'll want to make sure that this tank working pressure adjustment knob is all the way out. You'll want to make sure that the needle valve is closed, just so gas doesn't escape. So in order to tighten it, I'm just going to leave it a little bit crooked here, and then I'm tightening the knob. That should be good. Next up, I'll try to open it and let's see what happens. So we have pressure inside the regulator. I don't hear any leaking. That doesn't mean it doesn't leak. We're going to test that in a moment. But first I'll just want to make sure that this knob works as intended. So I'm going to adjust the working pressure. Works fine. I do actually hear a slight bit of hissing, so it might be leaking. Alright, I'm going to keep the cylinder open for now. Some gas might escape, but that's fine. So this is just soapy water. We're going to spray the regulator any place it might be leaking. We will see bubbles forming. Now I'm just going to leave it for a couple of minutes and then get back to it. Alright, so it's been like a couple of minutes, and although I don't see any bubbles forming anywhere, I definitely do think that it's leaking. Now the reason is the needle valve is completely closed. You can't see any bubbles going out of the bubble counter, and the main tank pressure is fine, although that would be fine even if it was leaking. But here's the issue. So normally this working pressure adjustment is set at 30 psi. That's probably where I would keep it, but you can see it drops as soon as I'm opening the valve, and actually this would be keeping pressure if it wasn't leaking. And also I do hear a slight hiss. Now this is an internal issue. I know this because if it was external I would see bubbles forming from the soapy water. So more than likely it's a dried out O-ring or some kind of internal issue. The housing might be cracked, something like that. So I am going to try, and I'm going to emphasize try, taking this regulator apart. I have never done that before, so I might screw this up completely. But like I said, it was a cheap regulator, and I don't have anything to lose in it really. At worst it'll be a learning experience. So let's see how this goes. Okay guys, so take two. I haven't touched anything yet really, but turns out that when I just kept on turning this, eventually it did keep its pressure, as you can see. So I'm guessing the O-ring in here is just dried out. It needs some lubrication, and I could leave it as is, but odds are it will start leaking again pretty soon. Just the action of moving the valve got it free from its seized position. But it would eventually seize again, just because it needs that lubrication. So I am still going to try to take this apart, so let's see what happens. Alright, so here we are with the regulator. Now as you can see, it's actually still keeping pressure even though it's been like half an hour or something like that. So it definitely does work and does seal right now. The thing is, for how long? I could use it as it is and it might be fine for like years, but seeing as I know it has already leaked, I think I'm just going to make sure that I've done my part so that it doesn't leak again. Now also I'm going to completely destroy this regulator, so I'm no expert. If you choose to copy me, do this at your own risk. But I thought it would be fun to take a look either way. So I'm guessing that underneath the knob here, this shiny plate, there's probably going to be a screw that holds this knob in place, which would allow us access into the internals. So I'm going to attempt to remove this. Whether I'm going to be successful, time is going to tell. So first let's try and get this thingy-mabob off. I would imagine that it's adhered in place somehow. Alright, so I think I almost have it here. There we go. And we have a tiny little umbraco bolt, it seems. So let me just see what tools I have that might fit this. So I don't know if you can see this, but there's just this tiny little thing in the center here. It might not even be a screw, but time will tell. I don't know how it would otherwise be secured on here. So let's see. Alright, so new plan. I actually don't think that's a screw. It does fit tiny Torx, but there's just no give in it at all. It could be glued, I don't know, but I think I'm going to see if there's something in the back here instead that might keep it in place. So back to prying here. That's interesting. So I don't know if it's a screw, but it looks like a huge flathead screw. Although it could very well just be machined into place. I'm going to ruin this, I just know it. But let's try it out. Oh, here we go. Pressure was released. So here is a tiny little O-ring. I'm just going to see what happens here when I turn this knob now. Alright, so there's not really anything to see here. So I would still guess that it is turned. The O-ring I need is on the other side somewhere. But it does look nice and clean in here, so I don't think it's an oxidation issue. There's a small spring. You know, thinking about it, well, I don't know. It does turn out an awful lot nicer now. So it could be that O-ring, but I do see a spring in here as well. I don't see any retaining clips or anything like that. I just see that small little, what looks to be a Torx head right there. Just it doesn't really want to budge when I screw on it. Oh, here we go. Oh, well no, here we don't go. Well, I don't want to strip it out either. Alright, so I don't know if you can see this, but here's a picture of that tiny little screw. I definitely think it's a Torx screw. Now it could be what we call lynx thread or right thread. I don't know, it could be glued, it could be a ton of things, but it does not seem to budge when I turn it. And I'm afraid of stripping it out if I use too much force. So let me have a think on this and just let me get back. Okay people, so it's a little bit later now. In fact, it's much later. It's getting dark out, and any minute now the tanks are going to turn off their lights. In fact, one of them already have. But I sat down and thought about this for a second, and I thought maybe this is not a screw, it was just a counter screw, and that's exactly what it was. So instead of trying to turn the screw itself, I held the screw with this little ratchet here, and then I turned the actual knob, which made it come loose. So that was fine. So that's where we are now. Let's see if we can get any further on this today. Okay, let's see if we can take this apart anymore. So I think probably you need some sort of special tool to grab this hole here and then this hole on the other side, but and the reason I think that is because that's exactly how we got the backside loose, just with a large screwdriver. So probably this is going to unscrew the same way. I don't have that special tool, so I'm just gonna jam my screwdriver in one of the holes and see what happens. Oh, it turns. So that was how you were supposed to get this loose. Let's see what's on the inside of this. So I can see they've used some sort of grease here, probably lithium grease. So when I reassemble, I'm going to do the same thing. And here we have another O-ring that's probably not the one leaking, since this is just a static assembly, it doesn't move. So let's see here. Now this one, on the other hand, does move. When you turn the knob, this little thing moves in and out, I think. So probably this could be the leaky O-ring. But I'm going to take it all apart just to be sure. Just some small parts here, nothing that has an O-ring, but you can see it has plenty of grease. So again, when I reassemble, I'm going to reapply some of this grease. So now we are inside the regulator itself. This does not seem to move, although it might just be spring-loaded. So I think I am going to try and take that apart. Okay, so to get this out, we're going to need a suitable ratchet. That was too big. That seems to fit. It turns very loosely, although it does feel like there's a spring underneath. So let's see what happens. Definitely a spring. And this, I would guess, it's not the troublesome O-ring. Again, this is a static O-ring, so I don't think this could be it either. Although saying that, there is a lot of dirt in here. And this seems to be a moving needle, so probably when you turn that knob it pushes on that. And I'm going to be a little bit careful here. Alright, so there's just the spring underneath. Small little spring. Now my guess is that probably there is some dirt in here, which, although you can't see it now, it's already come out, but there was. And then I would guess that this O-ring here is probably our leaky O-ring. It does seem to be very well greased with this lithium grease. So what I'm going to do now is just wipe it all clean, reapply some grease, and then reassemble in this reverse order. It doesn't feel like there's any damage on the O-ring itself, so I'm not that worried about it. Now the seat of the O-ring seems to be fine too. Again, a lot of grease. Not really that worried. I'm pretty sure when this has been repacked with some lithium grease, it's probably going to seal just fine. So yeah, I'm going to clean this with just some alcohol and some Q-tips, and then I'm going to reapply some grease, and then I will be right back. Okay guys, so I wiped away the old grease, and now I'm just going to reapply some fresh grease. Now I'm just going to use this lithium grease. It's water resistant, it can handle moisture, it can handle everything, heat, cold, and it should be pretty much harmless to the fish. Normally I would use a paste sort of version of it, but I don't have that right now, so I'm just going to use what I have. Again, I have a feeling that the trouble O-ring was the one on this part. Although I don't see any damage, I don't feel any damage, it does protrude nicely, so I don't see why it wouldn't seal. Something must have gone wrong. Maybe the old grease was just not working right. So I'm going to apply a liberal amount. I will want this surface that this sits on to be very well lubricated. So I'm going to reassemble in the reverse order. Now again, lots of grease in here. And just to make doubly sure, I'm just going to apply some on the other side of this too. I want that the surface that the O-ring is riding on to be very well lubricated. It's not like with the oil where you don't want to use as much. This stuff you really need to put on there. It has to last a long time. Now my fingers are already greasy, so I'm just threading this static O-ring. I'm not going to worry too much about the grease from that's on my fingers. It's more than enough. It doesn't move anyway. Alright, so then this little part in here. Again, the grease on my fingers is enough for this O-ring, it doesn't move. There's this tiny spring that goes in here. And in order to screw this in, I'm actually just going to turn this regulator upside down, just so the part does not drop out. Going by feel. Not that easy. I don't want any cross threading, so I want to be careful. Here we go. Now my fingers are probably too greasy to just go do this by hand, but still, I'm going to try. Yeah, that's good enough. So you want to be careful here, don't cross thread, don't over tighten, just snug it down. Again, this part is not moving, it's not under heavy load or anything like that. So that should in fact be it. We should be ready to assemble this part. Again, just screwing it down nicely. The O-ring should be well greased with what's on my fingers right now. And again, I don't have the proper tool to snug this down right, so I'm just going to again use the screwdriver as I did when I took it out. There is a chance you could damage something by doing it this way, but yeah. It's already leaking, so what else could go wrong, right? Alright, so just have to put the knob back on. Now really, this should be calibrated a certain way, but I don't have the tool to do that. So I'm just going to put it down like I did when I took it off. And then snug it up to approximately where it was. I don't want to be too heavy with it. I'm getting grease everywhere here. A little bit more than this. I'm just going to need something to hold on so it doesn't slip. Yeah, everything's greasy. Now there would have been thread locker in this originally, but I can feel it's still nice and snug, so I'm not gonna worry too much. There we go. Now let's see. Seems fine. In fact, it seems a lot smoother than it was before. So hopefully we did something right here. Alright, so here's the thing. The tanks have all turned off, the CO2 is off, so I'm not going to worry about this anymore today. But I'll see you right back here tomorrow. And then we'll try and put it on and see if it still leaks. Alright? Alright guys, so a new day, and we are almost ready to test out our fix here. But I just thought, since we are at it, we might as well just lubricate the remaining seals. That is the needle valve and the bubble counter. So let me just take that apart. Now the needle valve is a moving part, so I will want to use the grease. However, I don't want to actually clog up the valve itself. Here you can see the actual needle valve along with the seal. So sparingly, I'm just going to spray some here, and then I'm going to take a Q-tip, and then I just want to lubricate the seal itself and the threads, but I do not want to touch the actual needle. This means there's very little chance that anything will clog up. And I don't know if you can see, but the needle itself is actually pretty clean, so I'm not gonna bother doing anything there. Just reinsert. Let the threads catch, don't cross thread it. Crank it down till it's fully closed. There we go. Next up is the bubble counter. Now I could just use some oil on this. In fact, it seems pretty well lubricated already. But I have this grease here already, so I'm just going to use it here. You don't need much. This is not a moving part, so all it needs to do is seal. Then it should be fine until I need to remove the bubble counter at another date. There we go. fact, I think I might have cross-threaded that. No, it's fine. There we go. Alright. So, I'm going to mount this back up to the CO2 canister, and then we're going to see if our fix worked or if more drastic measures are needed. Okay guys, so here we are back at the tank. I've hooked up the regulator to the cylinder. So it's time to do some testing. Now the first thing I'm just going to do is pressurize the system, making sure that the needle valve is closed and that this is fully open. Well, the knob is open, that would mean the valve is closed. So let's see. Seems to be working, I don't hear any hissing. So now the system is pressurized, so let's just try and turn to see if we get any leaks. I'm not hearing anything yet. Seems fine so far. So when this is in use, I will want it at about 30 psi. But I am going to open it fully to see if it's keeping pressure. Still no hissing. So far it seems to be good. Now let's try and close this valve again and see if the pressure drops. Seems good so far. Alright, so far no leaks. Now what I'm going to do is close the main valve on the cylinder again. And then I'm just going to leave the system for a while and see if it keeps pressure. So I'll be back in a little while. Okay guys, so it's been a couple of hours I think, so it does appear to be keeping pressure for now. The leak did appear while turning the working pressure adjustment knob. So while the cylinder is depressurized and the system itself is isolated and pressurized, I'm just going to do that a few times to test if the pressure drops, but it does appear to be tight right now. So let's just see. Alright, that's fully open. Let's close it again. It appears to be just fine. No hissing. The needle does move a little bit, but it's nothing abnormal. So I'm satisfied that this will probably last for a while. Now the thing we haven't tested yet, seeing as we have the high pressure side and the low pressure side isolated, the one place it could still leak is the needle valve and the bubble counter. So to test that, I'm just going to hook the system up to power, hook it up to the tank, and then open the needle valve and soap it all up. So give me a second to do that. Okay, so we got everything hooked up, and I'm just going to soap it all up now to check for any potential leaks. The one place we haven't checked yet, but I'm not expecting anything. I'm just going to give the whole thing. Better safe than sorry, right? So I'm going to wait a couple of minutes and then I'll get right back to you. Okay guys, so it's been another few minutes and seems like everything is sealed up nicely. No additional formation. This is just from the soap itself. It's not moving, so there's no leak. The bubble counter is set where I want it approximately. Working pressure is set to 30 psi, which is about 2 bar, which is what I want. What I need for this particular diffuser that I'm using. No leaks around the main seal. Everything seems good. You can hear no hissing, and as you've seen, I've adjusted this many times. So I would say we got lucky on this one. It's probably sealed up nicely. Alright, so conclusion time. Alright guys, so conclusion time. Was this a successful fix? Did we actually fix the issue on this regulator? Yes, I would say we did. Now, what was the actual cause of this issue? Well, it's hard to say for sure, but probably some dirt just got into that main seal, or maybe it was a bit dried out. So just by the act of cleaning it out and re-greasing it, everything seems to be working just fine again. So what is going to happen now is I'm going to hook this back up. I'm going to actually use it for a good long while. I'm going to keep an eye on it for weeks and even months. Retest it regularly by adjusting the working pressure and so forth. And if you want to see a follow-up video, then be sure to let me know in the comments, and maybe if you feel like it was worth your time, then maybe even subscribe to this channel. Lots of good stuff coming in the future. So yeah, thank you for watching, and have a nice day. Just in case some of you were wondering about the bird noises in the background, this little guy is the culprit. And his little lady friend as well, who's currently nesting on some eggs.